everyone. Our presentation for today is all about the social, cultural, economic, and political issues during the Arroyo administration. President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is an economist who first dominated the Philippine politics in January 2001 as a vice president who succeeded President Joseph Estrada on the heels of a people power protest, triggered by the suspension of the impeachment trial of Joseph Estrada. The succession was confirmed by the Supreme Court. She then went on to serve as a president longer than any since Ferdinand Marcos, when she won a full 6-year term in May 2004, making her the second female and the 14th president of the Philippines. At her inauguration, President Arroyo promised to usher in a new politics, improve moral standards, and provide leadership by example. However, her tenure was riddled with various issues, scandals, and controversies, one of which was the repression of press freedom. During Arroyo's administration, free expression is particularly under threat in the Philippines countryside, since it is in the provinces where the central government is weakest and the metropolitan media was least influential. The lethal combination of semi-autonomous local warlords, police, and military personnel in connivance with them has led to the killing not only of journalists but also of political activists, to the detriment of human rights in general and free expression and free press in particular. Some of those killed had been exposing crime and corruption, others were murdered for taking sides in local disputes, and still others were targeted after using their media platforms to engage in bribery and extortion. This exercises a serious chilling effect on the media, undermining its ability to function as a democratic watchdog. Arroyo's administration has also been accused of involvement in the killing, torturing, and abducting of thousands of Filipinos, mainly activists, peasants, human rights advocates, religious leaders, and journalists. Investigations by groups like Human Rights Watch and the United Nations Human Rights Council have pointed to the military as the perpetrators. They also castigated the Arroyo government for not doing enough to stop the atrocities and for failing to prosecute or apprehend the suspects in most of these cases. These extrajudicial killings and impunity under the Arroyo administration effectively curtailed free association and assembly in many areas of the country. During Arroyo's administration, there were routine and widespread use of torture and ill-treatment of suspects in police custody, wherein limited number of investigations, prosecutions, and convictions in torture cases, and extensive use of arrests without warrants and lengthy pre-trial detentions were rampant. The widespread perception of corruption in the judiciary, especially the lower court, is eroding public confidence in the justice system. It was also during Arroyo's administration that the proliferation of firearms, together with corruption and gross inefficiency in government, has made it difficult for the state to protect citizens from criminal syndicates, insurgents, and terrorist groups. Abu Sayyaf, a bandit terrorist group, has engaged in bombings, kidnappings, extortion, and killing of Filipinos and foreigners alike, whereas the New People's Army extorts revolutionary taxes from the locals, attacking the properties of those that do not pay. This provoke unrest and tension among local residents, which have led to violent civil conflicts in various parts of the country.
One of the economic problems during the Arroyo administration is the rising joblessness. Upon achieving an 11.4% unemployment rate in 2005, according to the Ibon Foundation, the Arroyo administration has the worst persistent joblessness rates among previous administrations. From 2001 to 2009, the country has experienced the longest run of high unemployment in its history. As a result, poverty has continuously increased. Since 2000, the quantity of poor families has risen by 530,642 or 13% to 4.7 million in 2006. Over the same time frame, the total of poor Filipinos grew by 2.1 million to 27.6 million. The second economic problems during the Arroyo administration is the growing inequality. Inequalities in the country are still intense. Close Arroyo comrades Lucio Tan, Enrique Razon Jr., Eduardo Coanco, Enrique Aboites, and others had a net worth of 801 billion in 2006, which was equal to the combined income of the poorest 10.4 million Filipino families for that year. Employees, on the other hand, saw the lowest rise in actual salaries under the Arroyo administration than under any other government since the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. As a consequence, wage gaps have expanded even further. In 2001, the wealthiest city, Metro Manila, uh, had an income per capita of 8 times that of the poorest region, the ARMM. By 2008, Metro Manila's per capita income had increased to 12 times that of the ARMM.
Cultural issues during Arroyo's administration. During Arroyo's administration, indigenous people have continued to be victimized or threatened by various industrial and development schemes. A number of mining companies, for instance, have excavated the ancestral lands of indigenous peoples without their free, prior, and informed consents, as required by Indigenous People Rights Act o IPRA, as a result disrupting their livelihoods and often causing major environmental damage. Resistance by indigenous peoples to development aggression has frequently resulted in the militarization of their areas. Meanwhile, textbooks in history and social science, as well as the mass media, in many cases, still depict indigenous peoples as being racially inferior to other Filipinos. The systematic extrajudicial killing of indigenous peoples and the continuing threats to indigenous leaders have additional adverse social impacts. These incidents have resulted in more conflicts, fear, and mistrust among indigenous communities, which is weakening indigenous systems of cooperation and solidarity. Because of the chilling effect of the killings, it also weakened the indigenous peoples' movement for the respect and recognition of their collective rights. Despite the policy of separation between the Church and the state, the Roman Catholic Church exerted considerable influence in installing Gloria Macapagal Arroyo as president. Clergy like the late Cardinal Jaime Sin was the symbol of church involvement in politics. At the height of the Hello Garci scandal, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines dumped the Arroyo ouster moves when the bishops stopped short of demanding her resignation. Instead, they only sought to ferret out the truth in the alleged cheating. Jaro Archbishop Angel Lagdan-Mayo, who became CBCP president, and some critical bishops had wanted to push the envelope, but they were overwhelmed by the conservative majority. Although the bishop tried to put up a united front, it was clear then that they were divided politically.
Here are the political issues during Arroyo's presidency. So first is corruption. Corruption scandals in the last 7 years under the Arroyo administration have cost Filipinos at least 7.3 billion pesos. It is said that with 6 corruption scandals so far, including the $329.48 million ZTE broadband network scam, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo has become the most corrupt president the country has ever had. Other scandals
under the Arroyo administration were the 728 million peso fertilizer scam, the hospital bank accounts, the North Rail project, the $14 million IMPSA power plant project, the 1.3 billion peso pole automation project, and the Macapagal Boulevard project. The amount could have been used to provide badly needed education and health services to millions of impoverished Filipinos. For example, it could have been used to help the Department of Education bridge its resource gaps of classrooms, textbooks, and teachers. On the other hand, it said that the amount could also have been used to increase subsidies for indigent patients in government hospitals, such as the Philippine General Hospital. These cases also indicate the Arroyo administration's high tolerance for corruption, since none of them has ever been satisfactorily resolved. So the effect of this is that with corruption, the poor people kept getting poorer, and so did the Philippine economy. So next up is poverty. So Arroyo actually implemented an anti-poverty strategy which is based on 5 programs, namely asset distribution, human development services, protection from violence, more livelihood opportunities for the poor, and greater participation in governance and social life. However, anti-poverty groups believe that Arroyo's policies regarding poverty are not effective. Under Arroyo, poverty has continued to rise even by the government's low official poverty line. The number of poor families increased by 530,642, or 13%, since 2000 to reach 4.7 million in 2006. The number of poor Filipinos increased by 2.1 million over that same period to reach 27.6 million, but the official poverty line is only 42 pesos per person per day in 2006, which buys just a kilo of rice and a chicken egg. A higher threshold of 86 pesos more than doubles the number of Filipinos classified as poor. As it is, household real incomes fell by an average of 20% across all surveyed homes between 2000 and 2006. The recorded 19% increase in nominal income over the period was easily offset by the 38% rise in prices. The latest available poverty data is for 2006, so these trends occurred long before the global turmoil and natural calamities since 2008, which can only swell the numbers even more. Next one is budget mismanagement. So education, health, and public infrastructure were not given much priority, even though there were large increases in the national budget. The president relied on reenacted budget. None of the proposed regular budgets were approved on time, and in 3 of the 9 years as president, she ran the government without an approved budget. And the last one is increased political violence. So since 2001, when President Arroyo took office, hundreds of left-wing political party members, human rights activists, journalists, and outspoken clergy have been killed or forcibly disappeared, but only 6 cases have been successfully prosecuted. Although the military has been implicated in many of the crimes, none of the 11 persons convicted in these cases were active military personnel at the time of the killing. The killing surged after Arroyo's declaration in June 2006 of an all-out war against the Communist New People's Army insurgency. The Arroyo administration has not sufficiently investigated numerous extrajudicial killings in which the military has been implicated. It is yet to take strong action against local government-backed death squads in Davao City and elsewhere, and has tolerated unnecessary delays in investigation into these killings. Proclamation 1017. On February 24, 2006,
President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo used her emergency powers and issued Proclamation 1017. The proclamation was called a state of national emergency and was similar to martial law primarily because she will be able to order arrests without warrants. The proclamation came after the armed forces of the Philippines received reports that some officials of the armed forces will announce their withdrawal of support from Gloria Macapagal Arroyo during the anniversary of the People Power EDSA 1 revolution. The proclamation lasted for a week. After this, President Arroyo lifted the proclamation. Petitions questioning the legality of the proclamation were raised by a number of groups and people. A few months later, the Supreme Court declared that the proclamation was indeed legal, however the acts done in implementing the proclamation were not.
In March 2004, the Philippine Daily Inquirer reported that Senator Panfilo Lacson accused President Arroyo of vote buying by authorizing the release of 728 million pesos. The money was supposedly to be used for the purchase of fertilizer which would be distributed to the local officials. Jocelyn or Jokjok Balante was the Agriculture Undersecretary when the fertilizer fund scam erupted. He is accused of diverting at least 728 million pesos in fertilizer funds to President Arroyo's 2004 election campaign. After a month, Balante appeared on the Senate that there was no fertilizer scam despite the findings of the Commission on Audit that there was excessive overpricing of the liquid fertilizer purchased by Balante's proponents. He cleared President Arroyo's name from any direct involvement. He also cleared the congressmen and other local officials implicated in the fertilizer fund scam.
The NBN-ZTE deal. The Philippine government approved the NBN-ZTE broadband deal with a unanimous vote of the National Economic and Development Authority Board, which was then led by Arroyo as president. The deal was approved in March 2007, less than a year after ZTE, a Chinese state-owned company, proposed it in August 2006. Due to some anomalies, Arroyo decided to cancel the contract in 2007. Former NEDA Secretary Romulo Neri testified before the Senate that Arroyo's former chairman, Benjamin Abalos, attempted to bribe him with 200 million to approve the deal. According to Supreme Court files, Neri claimed he told Arroyo about it. In their appeal, the Ombudsman lamented the Sandigbayan's handling of Neri's Senate testimony, claiming that it was not presented to the court, despite the Ombudsman claiming that transcripts of the Senate hearing were sent to them. Arroyo was also charged for violating the Code of Conduct because, as the deal was being negotiated, she and former First Gentleman Mike Arroyo traveled to Shenzhen, China, where they played golf with Chinese officials and had lunch with ZTE officials. Since the act was committed in China, the Sandigbayan stated that it does not have jurisdiction over the allegation. The cost of golf and lunch, according to the Sandigbayan, was nominal. The court could have established jurisdiction in that case, according to the Ombudsman, built on the notion of ongoing crimes. The Supreme Court did not address either of these cases on the merits, stating unequivocally that an acquittal verdict is final and unappealable. This controversy intensified corruption under the Arroyo administration, instilling in the minds of the public the belief that corruption in politics is unavoidable and difficult to combat since certain high-ranking officials are on their side. The Oakwood Mutiny. While the soldiers continued to protect the country, the Arroyo administration sold weapons and ammunition to enemy groups. The 30-year war against groups like the More Islamic Liberation Front or the MILF, Abu Sayyaf, and the New People's Army or the NPA was being exploited by corrupt officials to benefit themselves. The bombings in Davao City were ordered by the Arroyo administration through the Special Operations Team of Secretary Reyes and General Corpus, who then blamed the MILF for the bombings, strengthening President Arroyo's request for more anti-terrorist assistance from the U.S. After a series of planned bombings across Metro Manila, which were blamed on various enemy groups, the Arroyo administration planned to declare martial law in August 2003. The mutiny had a serious impact on soldiers because of their low salaries, or unfortunately, they don't often get. Also, Magdalo's grievances include the AFP and PNP as well as the corrupt and self-serving officials are all part of the government's corruption. The significant disparity among the salaries of Army's combat and Air Force's flying, the wealthy comptroller family which has complete control over the funds as well as promotion and advantageous positions, and an inadequate supply of medicines at the AFP Medical Center.
The Hello Garci controversy is about wiretape recordings of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's conversation with Comelec Commissioner Virgilio Garcialiano. The conversation was about rigging or cheating the 2004 national elections. In the tape, a woman who sounds like Gloria Macapagal Arroyo was talking to Virgilio or Garcialiano about how many votes she would win in her run for the presidency. She asked if she would win by 1,000,000 votes, and Garci said that she will coincidentally or suspiciously she did win by over 1,000,000 votes in the 2004 presidential elections. Virgilio Garcialiano whereabouts were unknown right after the Hello Garci tapes came out. There were even some rumors that he was able to escape the country. The issue created a lot of tension and anger in the public. There was even an attempt to create another people power. This failed, however, due to the lack of protesters that attended the peaceful gathering. Jimmy survived the storm. This issue was the biggest issue that threatened her presidency. Until now, the issue has not yet been solved, and no one has been punished.
The single most horrific incident was the Maguindanao massacre of November 2009, in which at least 57 people, relatives and supporters of a gubernatorial candidate, plus journalists observing their journey to register him, were brutally murdered, apparently by the private army of the incumbent governor Andal Ampatuan Sr., a staunch ally of Arroyo. Such heinous crime in the province of Maguindanao reveals the ugly face of feudalism still persisting in the Bangsamoro homeland. This causes public outrage and peace initiatives undertaken by various civil society groups. Issues regarding repression of press freedom can be enhanced by enabling environment for the exercise of press freedom and establish safety mechanisms for journalists and media workers that are locally anchored and sustainable. We recommend institutionalizing mechanisms for safety and protection. Such work will entail risk mapping and safety training courses for journalists and media workers, monitoring, documenting, and reporting attacks and threats, providing quick responses, and providing safety spaces, tools, and protective equipment. Issues about extrajudicial killings and impunity may be solved by conducting an impartial investigation and prosecute all cases of extrajudicial or summary killings. This entails proper documentation of each alleged violation, including the preservation of the evidence gathered. In this regard, we recommend the President to order the top officials of the AFP and the PNP to investigate military and police personnel implicated in extrajudicial killings and to report publicly on these investigations. A defective justice system may be fixed by ensuring that all reports and complaints of torture against the police and military are investigated promptly, impartially, and effectively. With this regard, there must be a body independent from the PNP and the AFP who will conduct the investigation and enact a law punishing superior officers administratively and criminally for the acts of their subordinates or other persons subject to their control under the principle of command responsibility. As a solution for terrorist attacks, the government should consider the perceived deprivation and other grievances that provides motives for violence. This includes political repression, the lack of autonomy or depravity of their rulers, and other issues expressed directly by the terrorists and those who sympathize with their cause. We recommend that the Philippine government should make no concessions to terrorists. It should not pay ransoms, release prisoners, or change its policies or agree to other acts that might encourage additional terrorism. This policy of no concession is based upon the conviction that the given to terrorist demands places even more people at risk. This no concession policy is the best way of ensuring the safety of the majority of the people.
The threats on indigenous people, the government should respect the rights of indigenous people. Review the IPRA and other laws in conflict with IPRA and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People or UNDRIP in order to ensure the respect and recognition of the collective rights of indigenous people. The church involvements in politics. The Philippine government must have a charity to help the church to provide what they need. The Philippine government should not use the church in politics.
To give solution to the rising joblessness, the government must improve the occupational mobility. Since labor resources are typically occupationally immobile since it requires time for people to learn the requisite skills to work in a particular industry. Each year, there is an abundance of employees and a great amount of graduates who are becoming unemployed. They are impotent to seek work instantly or easily because they are unable to work for the company that needs their experiences, and they are often unable to work in other industries due to lack of skills. However, the government can offer training programs to unemployed individuals in order for them to develop or acquire new skills that will help them to gain employment.
Fertilizer funds come. The Philippine government must have separate budget for the fertilizer. The Philippine government should not tamper the budget for fertilizers for the farmers.
To decrease the growing inequality in the Philippines, the government must have the redistribution from high-income earners to low-income earners. Redistribution pertains to taking income from those with higher incomes and providing it to those with lower incomes. We will recommend to make jobs compensate to everyone, even to those employees with no children, by increasing the minimum wage. Also, identify as well as eliminate structural obstacles that people experience because of their culture, gender, language, or citizenship status, such as creating college prep courses equally obtainable in high schools attended by number of students, or offering work authorization and the way to citizenship for immigrant parents.
With the issue of corruption, they should have enhanced government effectiveness and transparency, and also the government should work together with the people and develop an honest relationship. With the issue of poverty, the government should have created more and better jobs to offer opportunity for the poor to lift themselves out of poverty, and they should have conducted analytical reports that delves into the data and information that's available on poverty to come up with an up-to-date and sound analytical basis for policy making. With the issue of budget mismanagement, they should have prioritized education, health, and public infrastructures, and to have an approved budget and not rely on reenacted budget. With the increase in political violence, the solution is to endorse peaceful protests, and also the safety of the people should be promised despite of political differences. With the controversy regarding Proclamation 1017, the solution should have been encouragement of peaceful rallies to give voice to the people and let the government hear their concerns, and the safety and security of the Filipino people should be classified as of importance.
The solution for the NB and ZTE deal is to ensure that the project's details are transparent and impartial. Also, we recommend that they should keep seeking for evidence that would implicate Arroyo and her husband Mike Arroyo for the controversy they involved. For the controversy about the Oakwood Mutiny, they must discuss the particular issues between the people concerned so as not to worsen the situation and lead to mutiny. The government must listen to the issues raised and have a settlement with peace and order.
Hello, Garci. The Philippine government must help the NBI to investigate the controversy for them to solve it quickly. The NBI must have an investigation to find the strong evidence to let them down.
To prevent heinous crimes like the Maguindanao massacre from ever happening again, the government should devise mechanisms to prevent or significantly reduce major electoral problems such as election-related violence, establish sanctions and enforcement mechanisms against perpetrators or electoral offenses. We recommend to mobilize organizational expertise to carry out a comprehensive electoral risk assessment early on in the electoral process. This assessment must look into the historical and current electoral conflict dynamics in different geographical regions. To the greatest extent possible, consultation should involve all relevant stakeholders including the COMELEC, other relevant agencies, local governments, political parties, and civil society organizations. Our understanding of the political actors' incentives to resort to the use of violence during electoral processes can inform the planning of appropriate security responses.
So to sum it all up, President Arroyo was named the 14th President of the Philippines during the Second People Power in January 20, 2001 in EDSA when former President Joseph Estrada was forced out of office because of allegations of plunder and corruption. Arroyo brought an unprecedented academic and administrative background to the Philippines presidency, but her tenure was plagued by political unrest. The president faced a lot of challenges in her early presidency, which includes an unstable economy and protests by the supporters of Estrada. Another one of her problems include the ongoing battle between the government and the rebels. Until now, she has been arguably the most unpopular president of the Philippines. This is because of her numerous unanswered controversies, which were aforementioned, like the Hello Garci scandal, the fertilizer fund scam, expensive dinners during her visit to the United States, and many more.